And we're on the air. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in to the BAMF podcast. Before we get started, here is our contractually obligated musical intro. And that is meant to convince you, ladies and gentlemen, that we're a professional podcast, a high production values operation. And with us today is Mr. Ray. You can try your last name, Jamison.
Jameson. Yes,
Jamison.
sir.
I can.
Jameson.
Yep. Uh, Comic creator here to talk about his comic, which is coming to Kickstarter April 1st, called The Madcaps. And you can check it out at tinyurl.com/madcapscomics. And if you're watching this show, you can see that as a consummate professional, I've created a tiny URL that's floating across the bottom of our screen here. Ray, thank you so much for joining us, sir. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
It's always a good time to go on a podcast and talk about any comic, let alone mine. But yes, April 1st, it's launching, and very excited. This is issue 2. You will be able to get both issues 1 and 2 out of this 3-issue miniseries. Super
Okay.
excited to finally talk about this stuff once it's finally all out. Right now, it's just torture. I feel like my hands are tied because there's certain things I can't talk about yet.
We're saving some secrets for the Kickstarter campaign.
More or less, just critical parts of story that I want people to enjoy when they get to read it.
Okay.
But all in good time, all in good time.
That makes sense. Now, I saw the trailer on Facebook. I'll put that link in the show notes. It sounds like a pretty cool story. We've got this adventuring party here, and it looks like they stumble into. Initially, it looks like an undead incident, but then there's some kind of mystical drug involved.
Well, basically, these 4 friends get back together at their hometown, and before they can really start reminiscing and catching up, they're just right in front of them is right like ground zero of this undead outbreak, and they're able to help the guards like stop it from spreading.
Hmm.
And the dwarf of the group, who you could see in that picture there with green, with the big lovely orange beard,
Hmm.
he he recognized one of the fallen zombies to be a local addict. So amongst everything that they're trying to piece together, they start to come to a loose conclusion that this drug might have something to do with the outbreak. Now, by the end of it, there's a little bit of a curveball. So by the end of issue number 1, I should say, they're not actually sure. They're still inclined to believe that it has something to do with the drug, but they don't know.
Okay, that is a cool story hook. I, I really like fantasy comics. Some of my favorite ones in the last few
Right on.
years have been in that genre. And that's what looks like what we have here. This looks like it's really kind of screams out to me. This is an adventuring party. Is this kind of inspired
Um,
by?
Sort of, yes. So there's this story originally was based off of the first homebrew D&D campaign that I ever ran. The main difference is I took all the characters that my friends were playing as, and I injected my own characters into it. So I wanted a lot of variety for this group, which you can see from height, size, colors, and other things. The word madcap just essentially means an eccentric person, and I figured that was kind of fitting for a group that was full of non-humans that are in a predominantly human city.
Well, let's. I got a big picture of the characters up here. Let's talk about them. What's the dwarf's
Mhm.
name? We touched on him a little
So
bit.
yeah, that's Sarlacc Swamp Treasure. He is a dwarf that his clan of dwarves actually have a farmer's life. They actually farm and terraform swamplands, as stubborn dwarves seem to be, and culturally they're really good at tracking down and pacifying things that go bump in the night, which makes sense in a fantasy setting that involves swamplands. He worshipped something called the divine, and eventually he felt he had a calling to move back into his place of education, where um, he wanted to build a church and help those less fortunate than him. He's not a thumper of his beliefs. He doesn't shove his beliefs down people's throats, but he does want to help those less fortunate and just kind of be a good example through action, not so much words.
Cool, cool. Who is the blue skin fellow next to him with the glowing hand?
So that is Chasgo Blundale. He comes from a group of elves known as Augurs. Augurs live in a mountain range that is riddled with silver deposits. And because of that, as a byproduct, that's actually a thing you can find in real life. When humans consume a lot of silver, it actually tattoos their skin this bluish color. You could find, there's one guy on Oprah, he looks like Papa Smurf, basically. But of course, because this is fantasy setting, he also has a lot of resistance to magic with all this silver flowing in his system. And he views his people as dysfunctional. They want nothing to do with outsiders. He wanted to leave his mountain range, but his kind is the kind of stuff that kids make scary bedtime stories off of. So in order to fit in with the world, he was given some magical gifts by someone known as Annette. And he's essentially, in a good way, infiltrated Ivywood, posing as a human being with these magical gifts. He can change his appearance, and he's actually worked his way up. He's a representative of a noble. Okay. If he was ever caught, he'd probably be killed on sight. So it's kind of interesting watching him walk on that knife's edge, if you will. He is somebody that, although he has these really cool abilities, he tends to avoid using them at all costs for the sake of not drawing unnecessary attention to himself.
Cool. That's a cool concept. Who is the big lizard swordsman? Or lizard man swordsman, I guess I should say.
Look at me there.
Sorry, I kept up for a second. What were you saying, Ray?
Oh, my phone was just acting funny. Chasgo is just an interesting character. I really like the dynamic of him having these cool abilities and being charismatic, but at the same time, he is very careful and very, very reserved.
It is kind of an interesting combination. Oh, cool. Who do you want to talk about next?
Well, who do you want, the little guy or the big guy?
Let's go with the little guy. I'm guessing gnome, but let me know if I'm wrong there.
You're half correct. He's got a gnome mom, and he has a dwarf dad. Oh. He's a little bit shorter than your average dwarf, and he can't grow a beard. So it's understandable how he has a hard time fitting in with either culture. He does draw on both bloodlines. As he was growing, he found he has an ability to put this magical influence, if you will, on metals and crystalline structures. And he doesn't know anybody else with these abilities. Now, his mother, being a gnome, has similar gifts towards nature. And he's, so far, his best conclusion right now, just speculation rather, is that it's some type of muddled combo of bloodlines from being a dwarf and a gnome that has this mutt version of arcane ability. That telescope you see sticking out over his shoulder, he's rigged it so it can actually like blast raw magic out of it, kind of like a cannon. So he has a sword and he has a smith, or not a sword, he has a shield rather, and a smithing hammer, and that telescope actually pops up over top of his shield, similar to that of a Spartan with a spear.
Nice.
And so it's really cool when you can see such a little guy walk up to a tree and reduce it to splinters.
That is pretty cool. And speaking of trees, who is this this big
handsome?
Yeah.
So this is Madcaps Comic. He is a species. Humans have a hard time pronouncing the name of his species. The easiest, or the closest a human can pronounce it is Weir, but that doesn't actually pronounce it properly. It doesn't sound right. And I designed that character to fit that role in a lot of different ways. He was hatched as an egg and raised by human parents. He doesn't really know too much about his culture. What he does know is he's a descendant of a large kaiju-like electric eel known as the Great Storm Worm, which lives out in the ocean. One of the byproducts of that, not just being a very hardy individual, clearing 350 pounds and being over 6.5 feet tall, but he can also store in his gizzard lightning and vomit it out, just like how a snake has venom. He can do it sparingly.
He's got a bloodline. That's cool.
Yeah, and on top of that, I really hate the trope of big, dumb, stupid meat shields. So for this guy, his actual most impressive thing about him is his intelligence, his brain. And he is a hobbyist of the arcane, I guess is a good way to put it. He would be an amateur considered at best, but throughout the comic, you get to see a couple of cool things he does with magic.
Oh, cool. I'm guessing that purple sword he has is something special.
Yeah, it is definitely. There's a story behind that. It has a name. The name is Urus. It's mentioned in passing in the first issue. Also, it's not explained yet, and it's really cool hearing people's speculations. But when he does dabble with some arcane practice, his sword glows in a weird way. It has some type of ethereal flame that comes off the sword as a byproduct. It's really neat hearing people's speculation as they read through and be like, what's so special about the sword? In some ways, it's these 3 issues, they all take place over one night. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to feel like a slice of life rather. So it makes sense if there's little pieces of information where you feel like, I'm looking forward to hearing from that, because I was obviously just dropped in the middle of these friends talking. This friendship, mm-hmm. This relationship they all have with each other.
That's kind of cool. Sort of like media in media res sort of start.
Yeah, and also another interesting thing about Madcaps, being that he doesn't know too much about his people, anything he can grab onto and learn about, he takes very seriously. So that armor, that's just something ceremonial he's learned about. So he's been able to, through the aid of others, craft his own version of that same armor, which is predominantly brass. Mm-hmm. And another interesting thing about him is, well, I guess the best way to put it is he can swing a sword hard. That doesn't mean he swings it well. You don't want to be hit by a sword being swung with him, but he would have to line up and hit you. He's not oafish and clumsy, but that doesn't mean he's a good fighter either. He has no training in like parrying or footwork with a sword or anything like that. Many confuse him to be a soldier or a mercenary or something to that effect. But in reality, he's just wearing things to try and understand more about himself and where he comes from. The real scary part is when he starts like vomiting lightning, as I pointed out, or pulling out some other interesting spells, which you'll see more so in issue 2 when this thing launches.
That's cool. So this is issue 2 that we're doing right here. And issue 1, we'll have a chance to get that in this upcoming Kickstarter.
Yes, that's correct. So that's issue 1 and 2 of 3.
Okay, and 3 will be sometime next year, I'm guessing?
It depends how everything goes. So worst case scenario, yes, next year.
It's small press comics, I understand. Things are always fluid. So that is cool. Let me look through the rest of the art. Are you the artist as well as the writer?
No, I am writer only. For the interiors of issue 1, they were drawn by Evan Quiring. Shout out to Evan. You can find some of his cool stuff, including Lucha Mysteries and the Murder City Devil. You can also find the colorist who's colored both issues. That's Dan Kemp. He's colored Marvel Knights, late 90s, early 2000s.
Oh, nice.
You know that Marvel Knights #1, that iconic shot of him like diving back with his cables off of his billy club swirling all around him?
Yeah.
That's the same colorist, which is really, really cool. That I just asked these guys any help. This is the first time I've written a comic. Victor Medina, who did the interiors of issue number 2, he's told me he really likes the pacing of the storylines. He really likes how he says a lot of people make the error of just hyper focusing on action all the time. He likes the pacing, how yes, there is some action, but there's also intrigue, and there's a little bit of humor, but not forced, and there's times for all the characters to shine. And just a really cool balance overall.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. Got one of these. It looks like you did multiple covers for issue 2, which is fun. We've
Yes.
got the gnome dwarf here with his. Can we call it a magic RPG launcher? Kind of up on his shoulder.
It's his lovely telescope. He's named it Spud, and yeah, it just blasts raw arcana. As you can see, it's taken an arm off of one of those creatures right there.
Nice.
And you can also see the telescope steals the attention, but if you look closely with his free hand, he's actually knocking a jaw off of a zombie with his free hand.
Yeah, I guess I didn't notice that. That's I get the motion lens there. Yeah, that's pretty.
It's
cool.
It's one of those images where the longer you look into it, the more you start to discover.
Yeah, you've got some really beautiful art here, Ray. I'm really impressed at
Thank you.
all the love and care that's gone into this. This is pretty cool.
That was drawn by Russ Leash, and it was colored by Dave Kemp, Dan's brother. And yeah, what I try to do in each cover is I try to have it reflect something that's happening in this comic series. I'm a big fan of, if I look at a cover, it should advertise something of what I'm getting myself into. There's other people that will have like 15 covers of multiple different pieces of art. I'm not against that, and all the power to the people that do that, because they do very well and they're successful. But me, I just wanted to have the covers have a little bit more of an intimate meaning to the story inside.
Yeah, as a guy who grew up reading comics in the 80s and 90s, I can appreciate that, because there's been more than one.
Yes.
So I'm like, oh, this is a cool comic and has nothing to do with the story inside.
Yes, yes.
It's always nice.
I like the old 60s and early 70s, and I've used this analogy before, but it'll be like in Amazing Spider-Man. I saw one issue in a comic shop, and it was too rich for my blood because it was the 90s at this time, but it was Doc Ock and Spider-Man robbing a bank and bursting out of the bank, and it says, why is Spider-Man helping Doc Ock? Like, jump into the issue to find out why. And I really like covers like that, where it's like, what you see is what you're going to get into. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, it's how the cover's supposed to be. It's supposed to be the hook, right?
Yes. The main cover you had on there earlier, that's drawn by Kenny Calderon and colored by Dan Kemp. And that happens in the story. They're actually going to be they're actually investigating. Oh, sorry, that one there, that's Madcaps. That is drawn by Rod Ramos Rodolfo. And Madcaps, you could see him using some arcane ability, pulling ground upward. And yes, there's some cool scenery involving that in issue 2.
Cool.
The group picture. Go ahead.
I was just trying to make sure we were on the same page. Is this the main cover we were talking about?
Yes, so that's the main cover there, drawn by Kenny Calderon. At one point, the individuals, at the end of issue 1, they're actually able to intercept some bandits, which are transporting some of this fictional drug, weave. And that's page 1. That's page 1 of issue 2.
Okay.
And basically, they're going to be walking into the headquarters of a distributor. And from when you go back to issue or the main cover, you can see they're walking into a path. There's a lot of overgrowth, and you can tell like it has a little bit of a more sober feel to it, despite all the different expressions on their faces. They don't know what they're really getting into. I can't say too much. All I can say is, if one is going to be holding a lot of illegal product that has a lot of cash flow, you're probably going to have some hired muscle. And that's all I can say about it.
Yeah, that is a unique story. I don't often see that particular plot line in fantasy stuff, so that is cool. What, if you don't mind me asking, what got you involved in creating comics?
Well, I've liked comics since before I can remember. I have a brother who's 5 years older than me, who was more or less that beginning influence on myself. And man, I went through, because I was born, I make this joke, I was born in the Orwellian year of 1984. That was right in the middle of the thick of He-Man, Transformers, Thundercats, Brave Star, G.I. Joe, and the list goes on and on and on. But there was also that really cool team-up trinity of comic books, cartoons, and toy lines. And I had all this early exposure watching things like the original Incredible Hulk, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, the real Ghostbusters, but also going to the rental store and finding like the original 1960 Spider-Man on VHS and watching it and really absorbing those stories and really, really liking them. I've liked comics for forever. I've just been at a point now where I need to get this story out of my system. I really, really wanted to do that. And as I was saying earlier, it's based off of this homebrew campaign I ran over a decade ago. And I really feel it's a good story and I just wanted to share it. I don't have any control over how good or how bad my writing is. That's up for the readers to decide. And the only way I could complement that is by making sure a lot of good talent was around or tied to the project. That cover we're looking at right now, that's as I said, Kenny Calderon. He drew it up. It was colored by Dan Kemp. I mentioned he colored a lot of Marvel Knights. He also did over 100 or roughly 100 issues of Spawn. Basically, wow. 50 to 150 he did. And
so your talent involved. That's cool.
I wanted to make sure that what I was showing to the world was something worthy of the industry. So I wanted to make sure that all of the expressions, the detail, the anatomy, the body language, I wanted to make sure it was all there. And yeah, like we talked a bit about Dan Kemp already. If you look on any book he's colored, especially on the covers, he has the letter D with 3 dots. That's his insignia. And if you scroll to the bottom, I think you should be able to find it there. Maybe hiding somewhere. Maybe he's got it hidden. If you go to what else? What other ones did he cover? He colored the Madcaps one.
This one here.
Interesting. I can't even put on there. Now, yeah, this is the one. See, it's funny. Jen's making me look like a liar. It's hiding somewhere.
No, I believe you.
Anyway, if it's not on there, I'm gonna insist that they get it on there. I'll get them to Photoshop it back on. That one's done by Dave Kemp. That's Dave as well. That stained glass one of Sarlacc.
Yeah.
That's drawn by Jenna Stark, colored by Dave Kemp. But a really cool thing about this one's limited edition. What makes it so special is it's going to be metal foil to add to that stained glass effect.
Oh, that's going to be awesome.
Okay. Yeah, it's really going to pop. I'm really excited to see how that plays out.
That would be pretty cool. So you've been dabbling in comics now for about a year and a half?
Approximately, yes.
Okay. How's that been for you? I mean, I imagine you're probably going to conventions and stuff to do some marketing, get the book out there.
Right now, my plan is to get all 3 issues out. I am going to Comic Cons, a couple of different cons, rather. There's Comic Con, there's a Fantasy Con coming up. There's a couple of them. My plan is once I have all 3 issues finished, I'm going to go trade paperback. And my publisher, shout out to Philip Russert of Philbo Publishing, he's gone into distribution. So he's told me if I go trade paperback, he's going to get my book into various comic shops across North America. So that's very exciting. I'm really excited to get that going.
That's a big deal. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
So, well, hey, just to wrap up, folks, this is Madcaps issue 2, tinyurl.com/Madcaps Comic. Launches in 3 days.
April 1st.
April 1st, so 4 days.
1, 2, 3, 4 days, yes.
Yeah. Looks amazing. A lot of top tier talent in the art and a really interesting story. I encourage you to check it out. I have hit the notify me button for when it goes live.
Thank you.
I'll be backing on day 1. And Ray, it's
appreciate it.
Yeah, it's awesome. It looks like it'll be a lot of fun. Can't wait to check out issue 1 and 2.
Beautiful.
That begs the question: is issue 2 done? Do we get issue 2 with this, or is that still in production?
Issue 2, Victor Medina doing the interiors. He had a little bit of a hiccup because of the LA fires. He is just finishing that up, and I have Dan Kemp coloring in tandem. And then Michael Myers, who's doing all the lettering, he's doing that separately, and they're going to be combining them. So there will be a very minor wait, but it will not be long.
All right, cool. Sounds good. Look forward to checking it out. Maybe we can have you back on for issue 3. So, Ray, thanks for
Right
coming
on.
on. It's a real pleasure talking to you.
It's been a great time. Thank you very much.
No worries. And please check us out tomorrow night, folks. We will have Owen Casey Stevens on. We'll be talking about the best superhero flicks of the 90s. And believe it or not, there were a couple of good ones. So we'll catch you then, folks. Have a good Friday.
Bye for now.
Bye for now. There's